All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee, Thursday, February 13th. We have not that many bills, but our first bill has 23 witnesses, Delegate Wilkins, and none of them are in opposition. No unfavorable testimony. So let's call up House Bill 707, Delegate Wilkins, Vehicle Laws, Licenses, Identification Cards, and Moped Operators Permits, Notation of Non-Apparent Disability. And if you have a panel, feel free to bring them up.
Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and the entire committee. I am pleased to present House Bill 707, Eric's ID Law, on behalf of Delegate Kim Taylor and myself, and the over 30 bipartisan co-sponsors of this legislation. Eric's ID Law creates an optional designation on a Maryland license or identification card for people with non-apparent disabilities to help enhance their safety and provide an additional tool for law enforcement and first responders to recognize and respond appropriately to people with invisible disabilities. I'm so glad to be joined by the namesake of the bill, my constituent, Eric Carpenter Grantham, and his mother, Linda Carpenter Grantham. I also want to lift up the secondary sponsor of this bill, Delegate Kim Taylor, who has helped with crafting the bill and the advocacy for this bill every single step of the way. We know you've heard this bill before, and I want you to know that we spent significant time in the interim connecting with various stakeholders, including disability rights organizations, impacted parents and families, law enforcement and advocates, to seek input and make adjustments for this 2025 legislation that's before you. So I want to quickly outline what the bill this year for 2025 does and some of the provisions that we've enhanced in the legislation. This designation is completely optional and does not require any proof of medical history or disability. There is no fee for adding this designation on a driver's license or state ID. The bill also defines a non-apparent disability as a health condition that is not immediately obvious or visible, including but not limited to developmental and intellectual disabilities. The bill requires the MVA to conduct public outreach to educate the public about the availability of the notation and requires the MVA to solicit input and feedback from the disability community regarding the designation. The bill also ensures that the disability designation will not be a basis for referral to the Medical Advisory Board. It also requires the MVA to contact anyone who adds the designation as a minor when they turn 18 to opt out if they wish. Finally, the bill requires that law enforcement immediately update and implement their training so that officers are aware of the designation's meaning. We've met with the Maryland Police Training Standards Commission, who I understand is here in the room and available for questions regarding police training, and they understand the importance and necessity of getting this training out as soon as possible. Finally, there is an amendment to the bill that should have been shared with the committee that ensures that employers and insurance companies and other entities will not be able to obtain records of this designation from the MVA, and that upon request, the MVA must fully remove the record of this designation from an applicant's transaction history. All of these provisions reflect the feedback and input from stakeholders, and I want to emphasize that this is an additional public safety tool, and quite frankly, colleagues, we need every public safety tool at our disposal when it comes to our critical communities, especially our disability communities. So with that, I would like to close Mr. Chair, if it's okay, there's so many supporters in the bill in the room who we did not have testifies in order to make sure that we saved on time. So if it's okay with you, if I could just ask them quickly to just stand if you're a supporter in the room on Eric's ID Law. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I urge a favorable vote on House Bill 707.
So thank you, Delegate, and thank you to all of the supporters who stood and aren't testifying. With that, Delegate Wilkins, you can orchestrate your own panel if you want to choose who goes next.
Good afternoon. Let me move over. Oh. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Corman and the Environmental and Transportation Committee for this opportunity to speak on behalf of House Bill 707, AKA Eric's ID law. My name is Linda Carpenter Grantham. I am the mother of Eric Blessed Carpenter Grantham. I'm here to support my 20-year-old son, Eric, who is highly functioning autistic, on his mission to help save lives for people like himself and others in the world that have invisible disabilities. We would appreciate having an option for a voluntary selection to have something identifiable on the Maryland state IDs. I'm asking for a favorable report for House Bill 707, Eric's ID law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Corman and the Environment and Transportation Committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of House Bill 707, aka Eric's ID law. My name is Eric Blessed Carpenter Grantham. I'm here because my mom have a talk with me if I ever get stopped by the police. And I have autism, which is a hidden disability. She told me to put my hands up, don't reach for my phone because that could be dangerous. She told me to yell out, I have autism, and yell out her phone number. I started to cry, and I told my mom that I can do that, but the police will shoot or hurt my friends because autism is different for everybody. This is when I went to my mom and I told her, can I make logos that go on the IDs and driver's license for people with visible disabilities like autism, mental health, and hearing impairment. I want me and my friends that have autism and others with hidden disabilities to be safe if we ever be stopped by the police. I would like the option to have voluntary selections on Maryland state IDs for me and my friends that have autism and invisible disabilities. I ask for a favorable report for House Bill 707, aka Eric's ID law, because we need to be safe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee, chair. I am Sheriff John Carr from Prince George's County, and I'm here asking for a favorable report for Eric's ID law. As you see, I am in law enforcement, and I have been in law enforcement for over 20 plus years. This bill, I feel, is vital and important as we talk about law enforcement serving its citizens. Those 30 seconds in which you may encounter someone and trying to determine exactly how you can assist or how you can serve them is vital and important. Having some sort of identification that we can then see if a person has an invisible disability to provide the resources is paramount to make sure that we provide the correct service. I ask you from the law enforcement perspective that the training that we do provide our deputy sheriffs and our officers and even our fire and EMS, we always look for new and better ways to be efficient and effective. This is a way that we can be efficient and effective to our citizens. This is a voluntary program in which they would be a part of, but then it also allows us to try to understand what that person may go through. I was lucky enough to actually have someone from our agency to go to a class that Ms. Linda actually conducted, in which we worked with and learned from those with invisible disabilities. Understanding that just because you see them in face value, you may not understand what they may be going through. Sensitivity of light, sensitivity of touch. These are the things that when we encounter somebody out on the street, already a stressful situation, will allow us to make better decisions and allow us to serve and make them feel more comfortable in order for us to conduct our business and to move on and to make sure that they are safe. So I ask you for this favorable review, and I was here last year, and I know we were able to actually have the state FOP give a favorable review. So I do want you to know that law enforcement and public safety is in favor of this, and we need to have this pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Wilkins, is there anybody you want to sub out who's also on your panel that you want a chance to testify before you answer any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, former Delegate Rachel Jones is here, and we also have the Montgomery County Fire Chief, who I can step back for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I am here in my personal capacity. I know I see you all every week, but I'm here as a private citizen and as a former delegate. In 2022, I sponsored House Bill 1121, which would have allowed for just this, and a notation on the driver's license to identify an invisible disability. Many of you know my sons. You saw them walk these halls. My oldest son, Aaron, was 12 at the time that I sponsored the legislation and has autism spectrum disorder. At the time, I remember sharing with those of you who were in this body at that time that while campaigning, my son was chased by 4 adults who later then acknowledged they were former law enforcement. And because he was not able to make eye contact with them and was not able to answer their questions when they asked, "What are you doing on my doorstep?" they chased him. I watched this in real time. Now, mind you, 12-year-olds do not carry IDs. I'm very well aware of that. But Aaron will be 16 this year. He's already very eager to get his driver's license. He's an ROTC cadet. He's a Boy Scout. The kids in his Algebra 2 class call him a math whiz. He is brilliant, but none of that will matter if he encounters law enforcement and is not able to make the appropriate behaviors that don't seem suspicious. This particular law, Eric's ID law, and being able to have a notation on a license or ID is going to provide extra protections for Aaron and for people like him across the state. And so with that, I think you already know I'm going to ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Never touch the button. Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Thank you. I'm Corey Smedley, the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services Fire Chief. I had the pleasure just last week to meet Eric and his mom, Linda, and it was a no-brainer when they approached me about supporting this common sense bill. So I'm 30 years in the fire service, and I'm going through my paramedic recertification as we speak. One of the mantras that we go by is to do no harm. So as paramedics, the first thing we want to make sure is we do no harm. This legislation, Eric's ID law, helps us do no harm. Please, I urge each and every one of you to really use your abilities to make change, to make that change, to help us, help some of our vulnerable populations so that they won't, in the worst times on an incident scene or when they have some kind of emergency going on, that you give us the tools as law enforcement and first responders to be able to have situational awareness and be able to de-escalate incidents so that we can help them and continue to live the life like everyone else. So I urge you to have a favorable vote for this law.
Great. Thank you. And Delegate Wilkins, is Terrence King and Wayne Silver, are they also on your panel?
Yes.
Want to have them come up? Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding House Bill 707, Eric's ID law. My name is Terrence King, President and CEO of the National Children's Center, known as NCC. I come before you as an advocate in support of House Bill 707, which would offer the choice of supportive identification documentation for individuals with varying abilities. It would give them the voluntary opportunity to choose how they would like to be identified on various forms, such as the Maryland license, identification card, or moped operator's permit, ensuring their experience are acknowledged in a way that that respects their preferences. As a Maryland business, we have been providing services to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities for over 50 years. From this experience, we know firsthand how this voluntary opportunity would assist persons supported within our services of over 79 individuals occupying 50 residential settings. We've created an inclusive and supportive environment where our individuals live, grow, and work and thrive collectively. Humanity and empowerment are the questions that are put forth before you. Every individual should have the right to identify their disability if they choose and have the supportive documentation to include them in their independent living. With this opportunity, individuals who choose to have this notation can feel safe and respected. Persons supported and their families look to our expertise concerning advocacy outreach related to accessibility and accommodations. We respect each person's right to decide how they choose their abilities that are documented. However, systemic ableism can create barriers for individuals not given the choice to have their disability identified. So on behalf of NCC, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak before you today. I would also like to express our deep appreciation for the Maryland General Assembly, which you've done, and you're instrumental in ensuring the access and services of programs with those who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we thank you for this time.
Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, my name is Wayne R. Silver, Sr., and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. I have been asked to provide brief informational remarks on the impact House Bill 707 will have on the Police Training and Standards Commission. The Police Training and Standards Commission is an independent commission housed within the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services that establishes officer certification standards and training requirements for approximately 16,000 police officers in the state of Maryland. Other commission requirements include the development of model training and policies, guides for law enforcement agencies to use as templates when developing related programs. House Bill 707 directs the Commission to develop training concerning interactions with individuals who have a non-apparent disability notation on their license, identification card, or moped operator's permit. After a review of the bill, we have determined that House Bill 707 will have minimal impact on the Commission. Upon adoption, Commission staff will formally notify all law enforcement agencies and training entities of the purpose of the bill and the legal requirements. In addition, Commission staff will formulate specific training objectives. Once approved by the Commission, these objectives will be incorporated into every entry-level training program in the state of Maryland. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions you or the committee may have.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. Are there questions for the sponsor or any of our panelists? Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate Wilkins, for bringing this important bill. Thanks to your panel. I wanted to mention that Ms. Carpenter and her son did a great job. Thank you for your testimony, your in-person testimony.
Thank you.
My question for you, Delegate, is regarding some of the feedback the committee's received from organizations. It was almost all favorable, but there were a few, and I wonder if you were aware of that, asked for some amendments. So the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council and some others asked whether you might consider provisions that would allow individuals to remove disability designation from their license plate. They gave the example that a parent of a minor child might wish to have a designation on the child's ID, but that child might grow up to change their mind, or they might have a different long-term health outcome and wish to remove the designation. So that was my first question. Would you be willing, what do you think of that, and would you be willing to entertain that?
Thank you so much, Delegate, for raising that. And I do want to mention how much we worked with all stakeholders and shared the bill and asked for amendments and changes. The good news is that is actually in the bill. It's either in the bill or the amendment that was shared with the committee, that when an individual, one, if they would like to remove it, completely removing that designation, MVA has confirmed that they're able to do that. So yes. Also, when an individual is a minor and they receive the designation, MVA is required under the bill to contact them once they turn 18 to give them the opportunity to opt out. So yes, that provision is included.
So that flexibility is baked in. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, my follow-up question for you is, knowing how much attention you've paid to protecting the privacy and the autonomy and the dignity of Marylanders in your legislative career, and knowing how aware we all are of the potential risks of, how do I put this, risks of unduly aggressive oversight of people in our country right now. And then last, I think, knowing the history of the world in the last 100 years and how some groups have been marked, and those marks have been used for targeting them for harm. I wonder how you yourself think about the context that we're in and whether or not a designation like this could put some folks at risk.
That's a great question, Delegate, and I certainly appreciate it. And I think that, I think a few things. I think that we have to keep in mind that when we talk about individuals with disabilities, that they represent multiple identities, right? We will all walk around with multiple identities. And there are some, for example, Eric, who shared his story where he is a Black man, and he's also a person with high-functioning autism. And so in the world that we live in, some of his identities are very, very clear. And whether it's dealing with discrimination or just biases because of who he is and how he shows up, that is a part of our world right now. And what we are doing under this bill is offering an option for those who do have an invisible disability, who want to be seen, who want people to know, especially our first responders that testified and our law enforcement officers that, especially in a life or death, high intent situation, that want that to be known, that they have the option, the ability to decide for themselves and also with their families that they would like this designation to appear. And so I think that we do live in a challenging world where many of us are showing up with various disabilities, some that cannot be hidden, right, as I sit here today. But giving the option for an individual who would like to have this potential life-saving measure to be added to their ID, I think that that's really a critical thing to provide for the families that want it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Lehman.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, Delegate Wilkins, thank you so much for bringing this bill, and to Rachel Jones, if she's still here, I'm grateful. I remember how compelling her story was a few years ago, and grateful she came back and supported this. I also am a mother of a son on the autism spectrum. So my question, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for you, Delegate Wilkins, or one of your other witnesses, but the final provision, the final paragraph in the bill on page 4 that talks about the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission immediately shall implement training concerning interactions with individuals with non-apparent disabilities. So, you know, as soon as I heard that this bill was coming here this year, I thought of the case of Ethan Saylor, the young man way back in 2013 who was 26 years old at the time and died in a movie theater after an altercation with 3 sheriff's deputies from Frederick County, simply because he wanted to see a second showing of the movie he had just enjoyed and didn't have a ticket. Those officers were not indicted, but he did die of asphyxiation by homicide. And so I asked the question at the time of the then chairman of the state FOP, what are the police going to do with, you know, in the following up on this case to better, you know, improve training, sensitivity, all of that. And that I can tell, I don't know that anything ever happened. Has anything been done? Will this be brand new, what you're requiring, and why? If this is a brand new requirement that is finally being followed through on, why has it taken this long?
That's a great question. Since the Police Training Standards Commission's here, I'll provide the first opportunity, if that's okay.
Thank you for your question, Delegate. I have to put in perspective, I'm very familiar with the Sailor Alliance. Our Director of Law Enforcement Training sits on the Sailor Alliance and has since the beginning. Law enforcement training, like most things, evolves. When I went to the police academy 37 years ago, don't do the math, this type of training was given as one block of instruction of an hour or so, saying, hey, here's something you should know. What we do now, especially with our training objectives, and that's why we're going to incorporate this into the existing training objectives we already have that deal with individuals with developmental disabilities, that deal with de-escalation, that deal with interacting with people in crisis. And many of those, ma'am, were developed in alliance with the Sailor Alliance. What we have now is, it's not a standalone course that a police officer must learn in the academy. It is part of a program. And that program has measurables. And those measurables include things such as how do your communication skills interact with how you deal with individuals with developmental disabilities or people in crisis, or your de-escalation techniques. And what we've developed into our training objectives, and we would add this into them, is we now have it, not only do we have to, you have to master those objectives, but many of them must be demonstrated in a practical exercise in order to pass. Now, what my commission does, as we do with all the objectives, is we routinely review them. We just did a full review of our entry-level training objectives 2 years ago, and they have been fully implemented effective December 1st of last year. We also have auditors who go out and they review all the academies. There are 21 police academies in the state of Maryland, and they make sure those objectives are being taught, tested, and mastered, looking at their way of evaluation, their methodologies. We look at their lesson plans to make sure that every topic, but especially topics that are as important as this, are properly trained, tested, and then followed up with when they go into field training and also in their routine and service programs that they have to do every year.
Thank you for that very thorough answer. Just really briefly, though, so what would be new or different about this paragraph F at the end of the bill, this paragraph about this immediate implementation of training?
Well, what we would do, as I stated in my testimony, we would provide all the training academies, all the training entities, because there's 156 law enforcement agencies in Maryland. Almost every single one of them has an independent training director. So we will reach out to all those training directors. I will do it personally in writing, but I also follow up with the Training Directors Association at their meeting to let them know what's happening, to get the word out so they can start incorporating it into their training programs. Then when we add that entry-level objective, and what we have to do to add an objective is it has to be approved by my commission. Fortunately, we always establish our April meeting after the General Assembly has ended. So we will immediately present that, the commission will approve it, and then that will become a new requirement into it as how to deal with an individual with a license, to know that it could be there, to know that they should look for it, those type of things.
And Delegate,
thank you so much.
To put a fine tooth on your question as well, following the tragic incident and death of Ethan Saylor, the Ethan Saylor Act was passed, as you may be aware of, and that brought communities with disabilities together with law enforcement to develop curriculum and training. And I actually have a copy from the Maryland Department, it's housed within the Maryland Department of Disabilities, of that curriculum and training here. And so this legislation, instead of creating new training, we literally have through that legislation. It's not perfect. None of the police training is perfect. But as the Police Training Standards Commission has mentioned, this would be incorporated into it.
Thank you.
Delegate Healy.
Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. And I'm glad that it has an amendment you brought, so I can add myself as a sponsor. But I did have a question about the trade, and I was here when we talked about this with the former Delegate Jones' bill, and I'm really glad that it's back and that it's a new and improved version, and it has so much support. But my question is about the training, because it's not just training of new recruits, it's also kind of putting a new emphasis on training people who have been out in the field for many years and maybe set in their ways and think that they're right all the time, and you know how that happens. So my question is about how do you go about reaching out to the police that are in the field to really educate them so that they know that this is not just another burden on them to do another thing, but this is something that is really key to what their whole purpose is?
What we can do, ma'am, is we can, as I said, not only is there a requirement when they first come on, but they have a mandated requirement for training every year. So currently they need a minimum of 18 hours. Most exceed that by a lot. And by coordinating with the Training Directors Association and the Maryland Chiefs and the Maryland Sheriffs Associations directly, we can ensure that everybody has the information and the requirement to train their folks immediately to add it to their in-service curriculum for that year, to get everybody up to speed. Being very familiar with most of the training units within the state of Maryland, big and small, they've already got programs on this. And what they would do is they would just incorporate the new material into the programs. Now, where it really comes into play from a commission standpoint is we look at it's not enough to teach it, to have it in a lesson plan, but you also got to show us where you've evaluated them, that they now know it. And that's where we come in.
And you follow up with everybody, not just the new recruits, but people who are veterans.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. I do have a question, however, because I do recall, and some of the unfavorable testimony references this, I do recall that several years ago, might have been my first session here, we had quite an extensive discussion about this kind of program, identifying folks with non-apparent disabilities. And we came up with this blue card program where we would put the license in a blue card sleeve. And so my question is this, what is going to happen with that program? Does this supersede that, or is that program going to continue? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. The Blue Card program is another option for people with disabilities. I think we need as many tools as possible. And sometimes when it comes to a high intent situation, an individual remembering to pull out a blue card when perhaps an officer or first responder is asking for their identification might be challenging. And so this is another tool, another layer at our disposal. It doesn't repeal or remove the ability to utilize the blue card for those that would like to. However, this would provide another option, another layer for public safety.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And Dr. Foley, we got some blue sleeve stats in the offseason that I can share with you because we wanted to see how this would work with that, so we can share those with the whole committee. Any further questions? Delegate Terrassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill, and to Eric and his mom for being here. I worked on this some years ago. I had this bill also since, I don't know if you know that, but since former Delegate Jones left, I had that after she left. And I'm really excited to see all the work that you've done on, and that it's moving forward. Back to the blue cards, and I'm interested to see those statistics. One of the problems, and I talked with MVA, and I don't know if you also did, but one of the problems that we're having is that people don't know about it even when you go into MVA. So I also have a son with autism. He went to the MVA to get those, and they didn't know what they were or what he was talking about. I see nodding heads from Eric and his mom. So I'm hoping that that you've worked with MVA, or you're going to work with MVA, and are you, I guess is now a question, working with them to make sure that they're going to make this more publicized and that also more publicized?
Absolutely, yes. MVA has provided a lot of input on the bill. In addition to, I believe we may have their support, but I'll let you check if it's in your laptops or not. I don't want to misspeak, but we've worked with them every step of the way. They are very much engaged in this legislation, and that this will be an option for individuals. And we even added an amendment that they provided feedback on, which is that for privacy reasons, it would take a court order for entities to be able to get this information from the MVA, and we worked with them in ensuring that we secure the privacy of our disability communities. If you don't mind, Ms. Linda wanted to respond around the blue card as well.
Yes. Hi, thank you. So although I do appreciate the blue card, Eric actually has the blue card. But if my son is in crisis with the police, they're not going to have time to read a blue card. Yeah. And Eric is probably going to be so fearful, he's not going to even be thinking about, I got to get this blue card, versus them asking for the ID and seeing on the ID that my son has an invisible disability, and they should proceed with caution on how to approach and interact with him.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising that point. I completely agree with that. That's the same with my son. I just thought if you went over and got it, it'd be better than nothing since we don't have this law yet. But I think this is a huge improvement, and I really hope to see it pass. Isn't that so?
Thank you.
That is so, Delegate Taurasi. You got that one right. In October 2020, they completed the design of the blue card and issued about 2,000 of them through MVA offices. Obviously, COVID happened during that time, so that was put a little damper on it. In June 2024, they developed an online request form for organizations to request bulk orders of the blue cards, and they distributed, this was a few months ago, about 1,850 via that process. But I will send that around for the committee. Any further questions for the sponsor or her panelists? Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Wilkins and Eric's mom. Great to see you. We will call up Kyla Clark from the City of Laurel, Kirk Spells, Bridget Tillman, Greater Suburban, Maryland chapter of Jack and Jill of America, and Jasmine Nicholson. And as soon as one of you sits down, feel free to get started.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kyla Clark, Council Member and Council President for the City of Laurel, and I'm here to urge you to support Eric's Law, HB 707. Every day across Maryland, individuals with non-apparent disabilities face moments of crises where they're unable to explain their condition to law enforcement or first responders. These are moments where confusion can quickly escalate to tragedy. Now think about someone you know with an intellectual disability being pulled over for a routine traffic stop, and all of a sudden, their anxiety starts making it difficult for them to follow commands. Or better yet, consider your neighbor or your parent experiencing a medical emergency, unable to effectively communicate their needs to first responders. Eric's ID law creates a simple, voluntary designation on Maryland licenses and ID cards that could provide critical information for everyone during a moment of crisis. This bill is remarkable. In its thoughtful approach, it protects privacy, ensures there's no cost barrier, and requires immediate training for law enforcement. I want to emphasize, this isn't just about adding a symbol to an ID card. This is about giving our law enforcement and first responders the tools that they need to better serve our community members. The city, my godson, he actually has a non-apparent disability that requires me to have ongoing daily communication with his teacher. Now imagine, he gets his license and I can't be there to explain for him. We don't want this to happen to anyone else. In closing, this bill represents our collective opportunity to make Maryland, the state that we all love, safer and more inclusive for everyone. So I urge you to vote in favor of HB 707. Thank you for your time today.
Next person can feel free to get started. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Eric's ID law is important to me because, hi, my name is Jasmine A. Nicholson. I live with diabetes, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and PTSD. I believe in my heart of hearts that we must pass Eric's ID law for those of us who have unseen disabilities. As an adult with a driver's license, I have had interactions with law enforcement as any adult may. A hidden disability logo on my ID will put my mind at rest. My fidgeting and possibly being irate at being pulled over, possibly, could be seen as what it is, part of my disability, instead of just being an adverse. I ask you guys from a very personal place to pass Eric's ID law for me and anyone else with hidden disabilities. You can be the reason we are seen. And our mental during these interactions can be more at rest instead of worrying about whether an officer may misunderstand any kind of behavior that we may be exhibiting at the time. Thank you for your time and consideration in this grave matter that is of the utmost importance. We must pass this law. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, delegates, and everyone. I'm Kirk L. Spells. I thank God for this opportunity to speak before you today. I also thank Linda and Eric for accepting and following God's vision for Eric's ID law. As Linda is, so too am I. My wife and I are the proud parents of a child with a non-apparent disability or hidden disability. He doesn't always communicate as clearly as society would like him to. As a matter of fact, he can get silent. During a lawful request for identification, a citizen has the right to remain silent. Therefore, Eric's Law would be a great asset for anyone with a non-apparent disability who chooses to remain silent or who are unable to verbally communicate, as well as an officer who is making contact with such individuals. The Bible clearly teaches that we are to look out for each other, especially those who can't always look out for themselves. Whether you feel or don't feel that this is a bill to benefit our sons and daughters, we have to know that it is. So please be on the right side of history and make Eric's ID Law a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Tillman, and I am the proud mother of a 13-year-old son and a sweet and spicy 7-year-old who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder when she was 4 years old. I am also a proud member of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated and the president of the Greater Suburban Maryland chapter in Prince George's County. As a mom, I just want to keep my kids safe. I have to have the law enforcement talk with my son, but it will look very differently with my daughter because of the way that I have to communicate with her, how she processes information, and also how she reacts and responds. If she was engaged with a scenario with law enforcement, her behavior may be perceived as resisting arrest or noncompliance, when in fact it could just simply be that she does not understand. As a former prosecutor, I also know that law enforcement, they want more information. They want to know more about the people that they're interacting with because it keeps the officers safe and it keeps the people in our community safe. And I also know that a misperception and a misunderstanding can be fatal. And because of that, Eric's ID Law's designation is merely a means to keep people safe. We have accommodations for people with apparent disabilities. We have tactile walkways, beeping lights, ramps, and handicap parking. This sort of designation would just be merely an aid for those people who have non-apparent disabilities. Law enforcement officers seeing this designation can de-escalate, turn off lights and sirens, and maybe even call a medical professional or a loved one to assist in helping with the interaction. I am in support of this, and I also ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the whole panel. Any questions for these panelists? Okay, thank you all so much for being here. We'll turn to Marissa Brown, Samuel Grooms, Christopher Feldenzer from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and Sherry Bailey. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Sherry Bailey. I stand before you today to express my support for this important bill. With just 2 minutes to share my thoughts, I aim to convey a message that resonates very deeply. Many members of our community lack the ability to communicate and articulate their needs or comprehend complex instructions. My daughter is among one of them. She was born with a very rare condition called Jacobson syndrome that makes her nonverbal on top of many other things. Eric's Law is crucial for individuals who cannot effectively communicate their conditions to law enforcement or first responders. As I am able to do so in front of you today. Some people just don't have that I'll call luxury, unfortunately. And this legislation is not a luxury. I'm very passionate about this because it's a fundamental right. It empowers individuals and their guardians to voluntarily provide critical information directly on their licenses, ensuring that first responders have the necessary details to assist them effectively. Just imagine not having a voice and someone approaching you and you have no idea how to handle that situation. That is fundamentally just not a good thing. By supporting Eric's Law, we are not just passing a bill. We are affirming the dignity and rights of individuals that need to be heard and understood. Let us take this vital step towards ensuring every single individual, regardless of seen or unseen disabilities, has the ability to communicate in their own way, be heard in their own way, and receive the care that they so desperately need. Thank you for your time today.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Marisa Brown. For 48 years, I have worked and advocated with and on behalf of people with developmental disabilities. First, the good news. Because of the increased availability of community-based services, people with autism and other developmental disabilities are growing up and thriving in their communities. This progress is heartening and reflects our collective commitment to inclusivity and support. However, it is important to recognize that individuals, particularly those with autism, may be more likely to experience heightened periods of anxiety, particularly when placed in new and stressful situations. I am here to ask the committee's support of House Bill 707, the characteristics of which have been described many times before. When I first met Eric and his mother, they were surprised to hear that many years ago I had the talk with my autistic son. I knew that because of his size, manner of communication, and anxiety, he would be at high risk for a poor outcome if he needed to encounter a police officer. Thank goodness that preparation has helped him to readily identify himself and cooperate with police during several encounters when he was a young adult. House Bill 707 is voluntary, so only people who believe this to be an important tool in their community navigation arsenal need to use it. Moreover, resources to provide additional police training that are extremely important are also included. Awareness of autism and other developmental disabilities is growing, but public perception may not be accurate and may not assist officers to take the safest action for the situation. Please support House Bill 707 and keep our community safe for all people. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions for these panelists? Okay, I'll try Samuel Grooms one more time. Samuel Grooms. Okay. Karen McConnell-Jones, Tiffany Scott Barnett, Bambi Harmon, and Dee Sapp, who's favorable with amendment. Please go ahead when one of you is ready. Someone's got to go first.
I will go first. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to allowing me to share my experience. My name is Bambi Harmon, and I have worked in the state of Maryland for the last 30 years as a clinical social worker, working primarily in child welfare. Children, youth, and families have foster care experience due to neglect and/or abuse. Neglect and abuse can interrupt one's development, showing up in their thinking and engagement, often influencing how they see the world and how they view the world sees them. This interruption can manifest as a psychological, psychiatric, and/or developmental disability. These can range from, but are not limited to, bipolar disorder and/or post-traumatic stress disorder. Many of these conditions are not recognizable. They are referred to as invisible disabilities. House Bill 0707, Eric's ID law, provides individuals with the opportunity to acknowledge their invisible disability and announces health concerns. As a licensed clinical social worker, I have the responsibility of responding to crisis. Often, I need the assistance of first responders, specifically law enforcement. In many of these instances, if I was not present as a social worker, law enforcement would not have critical information needed to properly intervene to assist and offer help. Eric's ID law offers the opportunity for communication when one is unable to do so verbally. Eric's ID law will help first responders obtain information that will be helpful when intervening and/or assisting others. It is critical to be able to assess in a timely manner, and Eric's ID law not only provides information, but does so efficiently. It is my hope that you too will support this bill. Eric's ID law, House Bill 0707, can be impactful for those with invisible disabilities, as well as those who have the responsibility to respond to the needs of the community. Thank you for hearing my concern today, and I hope I can count on your vote.
Good afternoon. My name is Dee Sapp, and I'm speaking today as a mother, not the chair of the Developmental Disabilities Council. I have 3 children, including a 23-year-old son diagnosed with autism and an intellectual disability. My son has a driver's license, is a senior at a 4-year university in an accredited program for students with intellectual impairments, aims to be employed and live independently. Obtaining his driver's license was crucial for his goals, but I still worry about his safety with law enforcement poorly trained and interacting with people with invisible disabilities. Disclosure alone does not ensure protection or safety. Last week, an incident occurred involving my son and a retired Maryland police officer. This officer is familiar with my son and his disability. My son fearfully reported that this individual used profanity and made threats towards him. When I confronted the officer, he denied any threats or use of profanity, asserting that my son was mistaken. Due to my son's difficulty in articulating the exact words spoken, the business allowed all parties to depart. Less than 1 hour later, the manager informed me that 2 witnesses reported threats and profanity used by the officer towards my son. As a Fairfax County government establishment, the manager filed an incident report, which I have here with me today. Regarding HB 707, a retired Maryland police officer aware of my son's disability felt emboldened to make inappropriate comments like he needs to use common sense and he's old enough to know better, despite having a daughter with an intellectual impairment himself. He exploited an imbalance of power without fear of consequences and lied to 5 people about what had transpired. Without witnesses, the outcome could have been very different. The ID designation is optional, but people who don't opt in deserve protection alongside those that do. My son never had the opportunity to disclose his disability, and the former officer responded with aggression and intimidation. More accountability and specific mandatory training can help ensure that disclosing a disability has a positive impact on interactions between law enforcement and residents with non-apparent disabilities. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tiffany Scott Barnett, and I am the proud mother of Brock Barnett, who is an individual living with autism. For me, one of the most challenging aspects of raising a child who is autistic is the invisibility of the disability. Unlike physical disabilities, autism is not immediately apparent to others, which can lead to misunderstandings and judgments. For those with autism, like my son Brock, unique behaviors and communication style can be misinterpreted by strangers. As a parent of a child with autism, I must be an advocate for my son, an educator for those around us, and work to create an environment where he feels understood and accepted. Navigating the world as a young adult with autism can be challenging. With the right support, he has learned to manage his disorder, develop coping strategies, and build meaningful connections with others. I am so proud of the progress he has made. As parents, our main concern is the safety and security of our children. When our children venture out into the world on their own, especially when they begin driving or as they become exposed to new environments and situations. While driving is a significant milestone of independence, it also presents unique challenges and risks, particularly during interactions with law enforcement. This is why it is crucial to pass Eric's ID law that allows individuals and disabilities to voluntarily show their condition on their driver's license. This simple addition can provide law enforcement officers with necessary information to approach the situation with understanding and patience. It can help de-escalate tense situations and ensure that those with disabilities receive the respect and compassion they deserve. For people with invisible disability, the bill is about safety and dignity for every citizen in the community. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen McConnell Jones, better known as Crybaby. Today, I am here on behalf of my family. In every generation of my family, we have mental illness. Definitely back in the 60s and the 70s when it was so discriminated against, and as a Black community, we are ashamed to say who we are. And because of society helped put that stigma on us. And today I stand no longer ashamed of my background, my inheritance of who we are. I fight and I hear on behalf of my sister who was mentally disabled. She was 4 years older than me, but always called me her little big sis. I remember giving up on her because it was such a hard fight to try to get legal custody of her when my mom passed. The system made it so hard for me, and I felt all alone, and I gave up. And then 2 years later, I decided not to give up, and I fought for 2 more years to become her legal guardian. But so before she passed this earth, she was able to be my big sister, my big little sister, and I was able to be her legal guardian and fight for her attention of what she needs. We are here because they are voices that needs to be heard. So I am here to be a positive voice for the ones who are not able to speak for themselves. We must continue to stand in the gap for them. And I am here to stand in the gap for Eric. And they not asked to be with this disability. My sister said she didn't ask to be born this way. But we are asking you to please hear us and please pass this bill. We are asking for your voice to be heard. We are asking for your patience and understanding. And we are asking that you do not put stigmas or consider it laboring. It is not laboring. It is saving lives. This ID can save a life. It can save one of your family life as well as one of ours. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you all. Any questions for these panelists? Okay, thank you again. Oh, sorry, Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all of you. I think you were all said that you were moms and sisters doing your best to stand in the gap for family members who needed support. I just wanted to take a moment with the chair's indulgence to thank you for taking time to be here and sharing your stories. We know that you came a long way. You took time out of your day. Heaven knows some of you probably are missing work for this. I want you to know that your testimony really matters and that the sacrifice you made to be here can help us make better policy. So I want you to leave here knowing that your contributions are important. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all again. We have some virtual witnesses. Lori Ann Sales, Montgomery County Council Member. Please go ahead, Council Member. Good to see you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the ENT Committee. For the record, my name is Lori Ann Sales. I'm an at-large member of the Montgomery County Council, representing over 1 million residents, and the Council's lead for eliminating disparities in public health. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 707, Eric's ID law. This bill establishes a voluntary ID program that allows individuals with individual disabilities to communicate their condition through personal identification cards. For instance, a person with autism could have a card with a logo similar to the heart logo representing organ donors, indicating their condition. This logo would also be added to their driver's license or student ID informing law enforcement if they have autism, a mental health condition, Alzheimer's disease, a hearing impairment, or any similar challenges. Invisible disabilities are not readily apparent to law enforcement officers, who often rely on their observations to assess situations quickly. They interpret an individual's responses to their environment and inquiries, which can lead to quick assumptions. However, these disabilities can significantly impact a person's reactions and ability to communicate. sometimes resulting in misunderstandings that could escalate an interaction unnecessarily. Research estimates that 1/3 to 1/2 of all use of force incidents in the United States involve civilians with disabilities. Studies show that individuals with disabilities are more likely to be arrested. Furthermore, this risk is disproportionately higher among different racial and ethnic groups, with Black individuals with disabilities facing the greatest likelihood of arrest. Clear communication is essential during police stops to maintain calm and ensure the safety of everyone involved. An optional logo on ID cards can provide crucial information about an individual's reaction to various situations, guiding law enforcement in interacting with them appropriately. Individuals with developmental disabilities are approximately 7 times more likely to encounter law enforcement than neurotypical individuals. This law serves as an essential tool for preventing unnecessary escalations during these interactions, ultimately enhancing
Councilmember, thank you. Councilmember, thank you so much. I know you know the importance of keeping our time limits on public testimony, so we really appreciate it. And we're going to move on to Sterling High, another favorable virtual witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Sterling High from Montgomery County, and I am testifying today as a former law enforcement officer and a father of 2 children with hidden disabilities to express my strong support for Eric's ID law, HB 707. As someone who has served in law enforcement, I know that every encounter carries the potential for misunderstanding, especially when communication barriers exist. Officers are trained to assess situations quickly, but when a person's disability or condition isn't immediately visible or understood, interactions can escalate unnecessarily. Eric's ID law provides officers with a critical tool, a clear, voluntary designation on a Maryland ID or license, so they can recognize and appropriately respond to individuals with unique intellectual and developmental needs. The training included in this bill will not only improve outcomes for people with disabilities, but will also help foster trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. As a father, I also know that parents of children with hidden conditions live with a constant worry. What happens when I'm not there to explain my child's needs? What if they are misunderstood in a moment that could define their future? Eric's ID law is not about special treatment, it's about equal treatment. It ensures that when my children and so many others like them go out into the community, they are treated with the respect, understanding, and grace that they deserve. I urge you to support HB 707 because it is a common sense, compassionate law that will improve interactions between law enforcement and individuals with disabilities. It benefits individuals, families, and officers alike, ensuring safer and more positive outcomes for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Pamela Mines.
Hello, my name is Pam Mines, and I am the mom who initiated JP's law in the state of Virginia in 2014. JP's law is very similar to Eric's ID law, allowing individuals who have autism or intellectual disability to be able to add an innocuous code to their driver's license or identification card, noting that they do in fact have this difference, so that law enforcement and EMTs and first responders understand that the interaction with this individual may be different. We passed it in Virginia, and we went to the General Assembly in 2014, and we passed it unanimously across 7 months and had a bill signing or had it effective July 1st, 2015. To date, we have 5,946 people with this voluntary designation. In 2018, I went to the District of Columbia and presented to them the importance of adopting JP's law, and they did. In 2019, they adopted JP's law, and they have 1,482 people with this designation. So at the time, we're supporting Eric's ID law because, again, someone mentioned earlier, it's a common sense law. This is also a bipartisan law. This doesn't affect just Black people or white people or Christians or Catholics or, Republicans or Democrats. It affects everyone. And if you have a child or a loved one with special needs or intellectual disability, it's very important that they have Eric's ID law and have it in a state database, not just the blue card, which I've heard of, and grateful that there was something done in Maryland. But this allows it that when they go to a state, when they pull that ID, it'll show right then that this person has an intellectual disability or a hidden disability. And we did it in Virginia. It's done in DC. And so we would love for you all to vote favorably for HB 707 in favor of Eric's ID law, as it will change lives in Maryland as it has in Virginia.
Thank you so much. I believe I missed one in-person witness. Mayor Cross, are you still here? Sorry about that.
Mr. Chair, to this illustrious committee of delegates, I thank you so much. To the delegates that have brought this illustrious bill, to Linda, to Eric, to all those that are present and witness to this change action that is happening here in the state of Maryland and in the America public eye. We are grateful, and we give you this greetings. This testimony is in support of House Bill 707. I am Mayor Kashina A. Cross of the City of Glenarden, but I also serve the NAACP Prince George's County Chapter 7023 Bravo as the Young Adults, Youth Works, and College Branch Chairman. Today we come before you and ask for not only dignity and autonomy to be put in the light of safety, but we are asking you for these fundamental human rights. The conversation about hidden disabilities is not a theoretical debate. It is about ensuring that every Marylander has the right to live in independence, confidence, and security. The ability to move throughout society without fear, to access the necessity of services without the ability to have a parent or a guardian when they have the ability to choose. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 U.S. adults live with a disability, many of which have been invisible disabilities have been misdiagnosed. These include autism, PTSD, and other neurodivergent conditions that require a specific response. We have over 40% of the individuals killed in law enforcement in Maryland that have had a disability. Ethan Saylor, I'm so honored that it was brought up today, a young man only seeing a movie with Down syndrome. We are thankful that we are looking at the studies and seeing that 33 to 50% of all individuals killed in police custody nationwide will statistically have a disability. The recent $200 million cut from DDA and the federal DEI&A cut sends, I believe, a wrong message that independence and safety is a choice of the people. We are asking for humanity to take the front, a treasure, a resource, and provide the tools for independence. Accept this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 707. Is Delegate Wims in here? Okay, Delegate Healy, are you ready to do your bill? Great, we will call up House Bill 628, Delegate Healy, Highways, Sidewalks, and Bicycle Pathways, Construction and Reconstruction. And thank you all for being here in support of Eric's ID law.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Let's just let people clear out Delegate Healy before you get started.
Wait, it's fine.
I thought they were all here for your bill, but.
Would have been nice. All right. Are we all ready?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for hearing this bill. For the record, I'm Delegate Ann Healy, seeking a favorable report for House Bill 628. This bill is about highway, sidewalk, and bicycle pathways, construction and reconstruction. And this is really about Vision Zero, and Safe Streets, Complete Streets, the programs that we've been put in place for pedestrians and for bicyclists to be safe on our roads and our state highways. I've been here a long time, and this is a different, this isn't the bill that I put in last year or the year before, where I was trying to get State Highway to enter into shared responsibility for maintenance of sidewalks and bike paths. Those bills had a fiscal note. This one does not. This one does not cost the state any more money, but it highlights and emphasizes the priority that should be given for sidewalks and bike paths along state roads, state highways that are in these designated areas for Complete Streets, for the Vision Zero plan, and it makes it concrete, literally and figuratively, that we will have a priority for making sure that people can walk and bicycle and not have to be in a vehicle and still be safe in their own neighborhoods. I live in Hyattsville. We have quite a few very busy streets, US 1, East-West Highway, Maryland 410. They are extremely busy, and there are a lot of people crossing streets. Nearby, in next street over, we have all the Purple Line construction. We need more opportunities for people to traverse along these roads safely. And we've done this for a number of years with the municipalities and the local governments signing MOUs so that they would maintain them. I think that it should really something that is a shared responsibility for everyone to maintain them and to actually build them. But this is a first step, and it doesn't cost anything. It just says that it's the safety of the people walking and trying to ride a bicycle along state roads in these designated special areas that we have already designated in the state. And I'd be happy to answer questions. I know that I have some supporters. I have some letters of support from our local municipalities, local governments, and others.
Thank you, Delegate Healy. Any questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, they're going easy on you. I do not see Councilmember Van Grack from the city of Rockville here. What about Priscilla Kania from AARP Maryland? Okay, and then virtually, is John Becker with us? He is not there, but we have a lot of written testimony as well, so thank you, Delegate Healy. That does conclude the bill hearing on House Bill 628. We'll return to Delegate Wims, House Bill 744, motor vehicles, reckless, negligent, and aggressive driving. If you have a panel, feel free to bring them up. Yep.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and esteemed members of the House Environmental and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Greg Wims, presenting House Bill 744, the Sergeant Patrick Kemp Act. The bill aims to address the increasing incidence of dangerous, reckless, and aggressive driving behaviors on our roads. I'm sure many of you have witnessed firsthand reckless drivers passing you in your neighborhoods or as you come here to work. The bill would tighten up the law regarding reckless, negligent, and aggressive driving by holding drivers accountable for their dangerous driving behaviors. First, the bill addresses reckless driving. It would make driving 30 miles per hour over the posted speed limit a reckless driving violation. It would also change the penalties associated with the 30 miles per hour from 5 points to 6 points on the license and imprisonment not exceeding 60 days if found guilty for reckless driving by a judge. Second, the bill would change the penalties for negligent driving. If found guilty, a person would be subject to 2 points on the license and a fine not exceeding $750. Current law assesses 1 point for aggressive driving and a fee or fine not exceeding $500. Finally, the bill addresses offenses that can contribute to being charged with aggressive driving. It adds 12 new offenses, bringing the total number to 19 offenses that could contribute to aggressive driving actions. It also lowers the threshold for someone to be charged with aggressive driving from 3 violations within a continuous period to driving to 2 violations. The penalty associated with that aggressive driving would increase from a maximum fine of $500 to a maximum fine of $1,000. The bill is needed to address the increased reckless, negligent, and aggressive driving behaviors of so many that are on our roads. And it would hold our communities safer than what it is today. I want to now just take a few minutes to tell you why we call this the Patrick Kemp Act. Sergeant Kemp, law enforcement officer, police officer in Montgomery County, has worked for many years enforcing drunk driving laws and speeders. At the time of the accident where Sergeant Kemp was struck, he was working on I-270 in northern Montgomery County. The driver was exceeding over 130 miles an hour, and this was his 7th or 8th, and I want to make sure, what was it, his 8th offense of aggressive driving. The bottom line is he had been stopped many times, and because the penalties were so low, he ignored the law. Thank God Sergeant Kemp is with us, because after being hit, we all thought that he may not make it. But thanks to God, of course, first, shock trauma, and the rehabilitation he received at Walter Reed, he not only is here with us today, but he's back on the force working. So with that, I would ask a favorable report, and the panel will start with Councilwoman Don Lukey, Dr. Stoddard, and then we'll hear from our hero, Sergeant Patrick Kemp. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. I am here today in support of this bill specifically because of the need to address the underlying behaviors and find a positive way to modify this type of conduct. Right now, there's a gap in what is available in that these are all items where if you are charged with any of these, you can simply write a check and you never have to go to court. So honing in specifically on the reckless driving option, as this bill is before you now, much more narrowly tailored than it was last year and fine-tuned. It includes a penalty provision, or creates a per se reckless driving standard under the willful wanton conduct of, if you are exceeding this posted speed limit by more than 30 miles per hour, it would qualify as reckless driving. As we know from our state's own Vision Zero website, for every 10 miles per hour, over 50 miles per hour that a vehicle is traveled, the probability of death or serious injury grows by double for every 10 miles per hour. So the point of this is not to be punitive, it is to be corrective, and it is to try to force that modification. While I understand that having an option here that does allow for incarceration might not be the most palatable thing, what it does, whether the judge offers it or does not, is allows that person to come to court. Without that provision, we do not have that ability to have the person come before the court, maybe receive other recommended services that they should be receiving. I'm a huge proponent of our diversion courts. I think they do a tremendous job, and I think we need to be able to empower our judiciary in that way to allow them to do this before they have these folks coming back before them for much more serious offenses. With that, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 744.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Earl Stoddard, and I'm an Assistant Chief Administrative Officer in Montgomery County. I'm here testifying on behalf of County Executive Mark Elrich in support of House Bill 744. In Montgomery County, we embrace Vision Zero model to address the scourge of traffic fatalities that continue to plague our state. In doing so, we aim to achieve a safer streets through a yes and approach which includes investments in infrastructure to address the deadly by design roadways, embracing a multifaceted educational approach for drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and making local legislative changes to address things like limiting right turn on red and conducting studies of pedestrian-involved collisions near our schools. Unfortunately, our system does and will always rely on a driver culture respecting traffic rules and the intended design and speeds of our roadways. As we all unfortunately know, however, some drivers continue to show a wanton and reckless disregard for current legal consequences and even basic standards of safety. These limited number of drivers actively seek to bait police officers into chases, travel at speeds in vast excess of legal limits, and flagrantly or repetitively engage in behavior that can have lethal consequences. You all know Sergeant Kep's story. This legislation isn't about holding the driver accountable for the accident that caused Sergeant Kep's injuries. We believe that the current attempted murder charges he's facing will do that. This legislation is about creating an additional or escalated legal avenue to prevent the next lethal or near lethal crash at the hands of a repeat aggressive and reckless driver. There must be an escalation pathway to address the behaviors of drivers for whom a prepaid fine proves insufficient to address a pattern of dangerous behavior. We request that this committee provide a favorable report on House Bill 744 to promote Vision Zero and provide additional avenues to intervene before dangerous behaviors become lethal. Thank you.
Chair Corwin, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the committee, I want to thank you for your time today to allow me to speak in support of this critical traffic safety bill. Spoke to you last year, but I want to reintroduce myself. My name is Sergeant Patrick Kep with the Montgomery County Police Department. As others mentioned, on October 18, 2023, I was intentionally struck by a driver who was traveling well over 100 miles per hour, resulting in the loss of parts of both of my legs on scene and at the hospital at shock trauma. I want to reinforce that this bill is not to address the actions of my crash, but rather enable law enforcement to prevent further tragedy from happening to someone else. What's critical to the proposed legislation is that the individual in my case that I was trying to stop that night was a menace to the roadways of Montgomery County and Frederick counties and endangering all those who drive on our roadways throughout the state. My history with the individual went back many years, but 2023 alone, his actions baiting the police, speeding well over 100 miles per hour in one case where I had him at 136 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone, skidding tires and running red lights was extremely dangerous. But absent fleeing from the police, all of those actions, when brought to court, would be punishable by a maximum of points on a driving record and a $570 fine for the current reckless driving violation. Most traffic violations in our state are and should remain that, traffic. However, when it came time for me to file charges against the individual in my situation prior to the crash, there were no appropriate charges that applied, and no doubt that the actions that were taken were reckless in their nature. The lesser of the two offenses, negligent driving, would have increased penalties, serving as a deterrent to drivers. Furthermore, the proposed changes to reckless driving would give law enforcement more tools in the tool belt and provide some teeth to our laws. All too often, drivers I stop on I-270 say, in the area of Virginia, say, I'm not going to jail, am I? Because they think they're in Virginia. And then when they realize they're in Maryland, they realize the lack of the severity of our laws. When they're stopped for going 30, 40 miles or more of the speed limit. These changes to the reckless driving will enable law enforcement to bring the extremely dangerous drivers in front of the judicial system where a judge can ensure that appropriate sanctions and intervention tools to prevent further negative behavior are in place. I highly encourage a strong and favorable review of this bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you all, and Sergeant Kep in particular. I mean, I remember you being here a year ago. It's great to see how well you're moving in uniform, still serving Montgomery County, so thank you so much. And do we have any questions? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for the sponsor or his panel? Okay, well, thank you. And Don, please say hi to your husband for us. We don't get to see him that often anymore.
I
So.
certainly will. Thank you.
We have a number of virtual witnesses. We have Robert Hill from the Montgomery County.
Do you want us to stay?
You don't have to stay.
No.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office of Maryland State's Attorneys Association, Robert Hill. Please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I want to thank Delegate Wims for his hard work on this bill, and it's very important. I can just tell you from my own personal experience driving on the Washington Beltway, it is more often than not that I will see someone driving extremely recklessly, over 100 miles an hour, weaving in and out of cars. And when that car gets past me, the next thing you know is there's somebody right behind them, and they're obviously racing. I just think that the current atmosphere is such that there are a number of people out there who are willing to disregard the lives of others, safety of others, and there's also a disregard for law enforcement trying to protect the public in these contexts. What this bill does, as I think the important aspect is, it does make reckless driving a really serious offense by imposing a 60-day, potentially a 60-day penalty of incarceration, as well as a $1,000 fine. And I do think, when I'm thinking about the 35 mile per hour per se recklessness over the speed limit, think of driving up Interstate 270 in Montgomery County. That speed limit's 55. You'd be going 85 miles per hour. If you're in a 30 mile per hour zone, you're going 60. Nobody needs to be doing that, and that's extremely dangerous. The aggressive driving provision, I think, is very important. I just noted in the fiscal note that there were only 545 violations issued versus 18,000 negligent driving provisions. And the reason is I think that the statute as it is not useful. A police officer has to wait until he or she sees 3 offenses before they can actually make a stop for aggressive driving. So I realize my time is up. If I could just say one thing with respect to the negligent driving provision, it calls for raising from 1 point to 2 points. After further review of this, I was asked to look at this bill, and I originally thought it was fine. I just want the committee to understand that there are many offenses, stop signs, running a red light, and so forth, that carry 1 point and are virtually interchangeable with negligent driving. So the only issue that I would have with this bill is I think if you raise negligent to 2 points, you're going to have a conflict. So that's the only issue. Otherwise, I would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll turn to Mindy Baden. Is Mindy Baden with us?
Okay, now can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Great. I'd like to thank the Environment and Transportation Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. 5 years ago, I lost my son, Brett, as he was crossing the street to meet some friends for dinner. I've been advocating for safer streets since that time. I strongly support the passage of House Bill 744. I'm not going to talk about numbers and statistics today, but instead I'm going to speak from the heart. On October 18th of 2023, as the events unfolded involving Sergeant Patrick Kep, I was filled with concern for this police officer. I worried about him and I worried about his family. It was announced that Sergeant Kep was 36 years old. If my son had still been alive, he would have been the same age. That somehow made the situation more personal for me. The information revealed over the next few hours was alarming, and the concern I had grew into anger. The accused was well known amongst the police. He had a history of excessive speeding, aggressive driving, and baiting the police into pursuits. Yet he was still on the roads that evening, endangering the lives of everyone who was in his vicinity. I couldn't understand how someone with so many citations, who was known to police, could continue to drive so recklessly. I've spoken to many police officers since then, and I learned that the accused case is not unique. Many motorists who greatly exceed the speed limit and drive excessively are multiple repeat offenders. It should not have taken the severe, life-changing injuries of a dedicated police officer to pass stricter, stronger penalties for those who drive irresponsibly and have a wanton disregard for life. Approving House Bill 744 will help ensure that aggressive drivers become more accountable for their actions. I urge you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll turn to John Sang with the Maryland Coalition for Roadway Safety.
Hello, how are you? I'm doing a little bit of granddad duty with an infant, a grandson, so pardon any noises in the background. I'm also John Sang here on behalf of Safe Roads to Maryland, the Maryland Coalition for Roadway Safety, to urge you to move forward with HB 744. It's not just another bill, it's a lifeline. When each of you woke up this morning, you expected to see tomorrow. and so did between the 550 and 600 people or more who've died each of the past several years, but they didn't make it to the next day. Reckless, negligent, and aggressive driving kills and maims. And yet, we are still debating whether Maryland should hold reckless drivers truly meaningful accountable. When we drive back home this evening, you and I will see drivers speeding, weaving through traffic, tailgating, and running red lights because they know the consequences are weak and the unlikelihood that they're caught. Right now, Maryland effectively lets these drivers off the hook while innocent people pay with their lives, with injuries, never mind higher insurance rates. So when is enough actually enough? HB 744 strengthens penalties, increases points, expands reckless driving laws to cover real-world dangers, like we've been talking about at the hearing this afternoon. I'm here not just today as an advocate, but as a father and grandfather. Every time I watch my daughter or son drive away with their young children or grandchildren strapped into safety seats, heading perhaps down I-270, I feel a lump in my throat. No parent or grandparent should fear for his family's safety because our roads have become lawless raceways for too many people. This is it's not about punishing good drivers, it's about saving lives. Please give HB 744 a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for these panelists? Okay, thank you all again. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 744. We'll now turn to House Bill 433, Delegate Edelson, Motor Vehicles, Reckless Driving, and Aggressive Driving Penalties.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Mark Edelson in support of HB 433. I suspect that some of us might sound like a little bit of deja vu. My bill is pretty similar to Delegate Wims's bill. It's one that I've had for a number of years now, and I'm hoping we can sort of bring them together and pass this concept, because at the end of the day, I think what is abundantly clear to us is that having set the Vision Zero target in 2019, the goal is to hit zero serious injuries or fatalities on our roads by 2030. And unfortunately, as we all know, we're moving in the wrong direction. According to the Fatal Crash Dashboard, since 2023, we have had over 1,200 roadway fatalities, 305 of which were pedestrians. Of those deaths, 392 were the results of speeding or aggressive driving, which is over 30%. Non-motorist traffic fatalities once comprised 1 in 5 of all traffic fatalities. They now comprise 1 in 4. As we know, speeding and aggressive driving not only increases the number of crashes on our roads, but also the severity of those accidents. What you might not know is that a pedestrian or a bicyclist struck by a motorist driving 40 miles per hour is 8 times more likely to die than a pedestrian or bicyclist struck at 20 miles per hour. So in order to try to really move the needle on this challenge that we face, the goal of my bill is to essentially focus specifically on reckless and aggressive driving and to increase the penalties for those two. Right now, the maximum penalty you can get for those 2 violations is points on your license and a fine. It's clearly not doing enough to deter this kind of activity on our roadways. And so my bill would increase the penalties for both of those kinds of offenses. And I'm happy to work with my predecessor in this chair right here and anybody else that has similar legislation so we can get the best possible version of the bill through and protect our vulnerable road users. With that, I urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Delegate. That concludes bill here on House Bill 433. But I don't see any other sponsors. So Delegate Todd Morgan, you ready with your St. Mary's County bill?
Yeah, if I can find it. It's here somewhere.
House Bill 460, Delegate Morgan, St. Mary's County Vehicle Laws Prohibition on Roadway Solicitations.
Here, I'm not grumpy, I'm cheerful. Like that. Thank you, Chair Corman, my guidance counselor, Vice Chair Boyce, the rest of you guys. I got a smile on my face. I sit up straight and tall. You happy? So this is short, quick, and easy and to the point. This is a bill that you heard a couple weeks ago from a different county regarding roadway solicitation, panhandling, for lack of a better word. St. Mary's County would like to be able to adopt the same principles at hand that have been asked for, I believe, Calvert County earlier, a couple other counties last year. The professor is not here. He did ask last week about the Attorney General position on the bill. It was submitted to you guys in testimony. I asked for a favorable report, and I will be done because we got a lot to do today. Thank you very much. Questions?
Any questions for the bill sponsor? Delegate Lewis.
Chair. Delegate Morgan, thank you so much for bringing this bill and for bringing your happy spirit to the occasion. I'm just wondering if there's anything else you'd like to say to help us understand why this is important.
There has been a lot of issues in St. Mary's County with panhandling on the public highways, particularly at very major intersections. And the commissioners have come to us with this request. So really, I'm representing now the delegation supporting the commissioner's request. This is not a Todd Morgan idea.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That helps. Thank you.
Delegate Long.
Mr. Chair, Delegate, just very briefly, is this in the same posture as the Calvert version?
Pretty much so, yes.
Okay, so all groups, period. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Delegate Morgan. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 460. I think we just got Delegate Kerr in here. So we'll call up House Bill 780, Urban State Highways Speed Limits Exceptions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looks like I got here right on time. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Delegate Ken Kerr. I'm here to present House Bill 780, Urban State Highways Speed Limits Exceptions. You heard this bill last year, so let me just briefly remind you of what it does, and I'll turn it over to my panel. So House Bill 780 authorizes the State Highway Administration to reduce speed limits on specific urban highways by up to 5 miles per hour without undertaking a traffic or engineering study. It's needed because roadway designs haven't changed with the increased traffic. Yet there are increasing requests for speed limit reduction studies on state highways where the posted speed limits no longer correlate with the driving realities on this road. So let me go ahead and allow my my panel to testify, but let me just remind you that the committee passed this bill, which is in exactly the same posture, unanimously last year, and it passed the House 110 to 27, but the Senate took no action. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. And good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Joe McAndrew, Assistant Secretary for Project Development and Delivery at the Maryland Department of Transportation. And with me today is Terry Seuss, Deputy Chief Operating Officer at SHA, who's here to help answer any technical questions that may come. But thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 780, and thank you to Delegate Kerr for the sponsorship of this important initiative. As he said, this bill in its current form passed this committee and passed this body last session. You've heard it already, speed kills, unfortunately, plain and simple on our roadways. Each year in Maryland, on average, 170 people are killed or seriously injured in a crash caused by speeding. And geography really matters within that. Statewide, nearly 80% of roadway fatalities occur in urban areas. A staggering 93% of all pedestrian fatalities occur in urban areas. And of roadway fatalities where speed was cited as a factor, over 80% of those crashes occurred in urban areas. As Maryland works toward its goal of 0 deaths on its roadways by 2030, a commitment shared by this body and by the Secretary Wiedefeld, measures that deter the behavior most responsible for deaths and serious injuries on the roadways are needed tools to reach that goal. This is taking a step in that direction by removing a requirement that we conduct a formal study that takes a few months to complete and costs upwards of $5,000 to $10,000 depending on site to complete, and allowing us to use best practices that we have at the department to cite and target those areas that are in greatest need for speed reductions. We can only reduce the speed by up to 5 miles an hour, but that 5 miles an hour can be really important in terms of somebody's ability to walk away if they were to be hit. Thank you.
And you're just here for questions? Great. Are there any questions? Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is 5 miles an hour enough?
So it really is contextual, right? Speed is one of the primary determinants on a crash turning to fatal, right? And there are many tools that are necessary to try to reduce a fatal crash from happening. Behavior is one, right? The actual design of the roadway is another, and that's something that we're working on. And our budget support there would be appreciative because it gives us the ability to retrofit roadways. Speed enforcement, whether it be automated or with our police force, is another. But 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour is an opportunity, but that is a step that we would take through a formal traffic impact study if we're going to reduce it by more than 5 miles an hour. So what we're doing here is giving ourselves the ability from going to, say, 35 miles down to 30 miles an hour, or 30 to 25. And not having to go through kind of a multi-month exercise. We'd still be doing public engagement with you all and your partners at the local level before any action were taken.
Thank you.
Delegate Tarasa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, and I apologize if you already said this, but couldn't you do 5 miles per hour and then do it again another time?
You want to take that?
Sure, thank you. For the record, Terry Seuss with the State Highway Administration. So under this bill, we would only do that action once.
You could only do it once.
If we were
Okay.
going to reduce it more than 5 miles an hour below the current posted speed limit, we would do the more formal speed study and do more public outreach.
Okay, great. And just to be clear, my questions were along the lines of Delegate Ziegler's. It wasn't going in the other direction, but thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 780. We'll turn to Delegate Grammer, House Bill 679, Maryland Transportation Authority, Patapsco River Toll Bridge Design.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a panel, but I'd welcome anybody up who wanted to testify with us. Or I'll get started with your permission, either your choice.
Please go ahead. There was someone else signed up favorably, by the way, Louis Campion. I don't know if he's here. Oh, there you are. Yep.
Dealer's choice.
Yeah, go ahead, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Robin Grammer here to present House Bill 679. House Bill 679 requires the Maryland Transportation Authority to design and locate the entrances and exits to the new bridge over the Patapsco River to ensure that a vehicle that does not cross the bridge has open ingress and egress to state roads. The fall of the Key Bridge is a horrific tragedy that has impacted my district more than most and even has isolated great parts of the area. What the rebuild of the bridge gives us is an opportunity to fix a problem that has impacted my district for decades. If you look we have a couple slides here that I presented to illustrate the problem. The entry onto 695 for the greater Dundalk area is adjacent to a highly dense residential community and industrialized corridors that are located between the Port of Baltimore and Trade Point Atlantic. This creates a very heavily trafficked area. Slide 2, please. The closest entry for traffic is exit 44. Westbound traffic went and one day will again travel over the bridge. The problem is the eastbound traffic. Even though the eastbound traffic does not traverse the bridge, it is directed to the far side of the bridge behind a toll. Slide 3, please. The consequence is that the communities of Dundalk are inundated with industrial, commuter, commercial, and residential traffic. Note these are the most highly dense communities in my district. The dots on the map represent an elementary and middle school. This is the last one. And this is the result. This is a picture of a commercial truck that has run over a stop sign, tried to navigate a county road. Traffic that should be on state roads, on state highways, create nightmares for community streets. And this is a long-standing problem. So what this bill does with the reconstruction of the Key Bridge, what we hope to do is create a requirement that a fix that's been in the pipeline for many years, a fix that has been in the Consolidated Transportation Program. We want to make that a requirement with the rebuild so that we can create, or that we can fix what's been a long-standing nightmare for some of the poorest communities in my district. With that, I'd ask for a favorable for House Bill 679.
Delegate, before we get to Mr. Campion, can I just ask that you send the pictures around to the committee?
Yeah,
Sort of
yeah,
send them to me
absolutely.
and we'll send them around.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of
Thank you.
requests for that up here. Mr. Campion, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Louis Campion, Maryland Motor Truck Association. And I really want to acknowledge the cooperation since the bridge strike with the Transportation Authority. It's been nothing short of spectacular with so many agencies, obviously MDTA, excuse me, being one of them. But we know that truck movements, can cause conflict when there is a lot of density, particularly when there is no buffer between residential and industrial areas. It's a delicate balance of jobs, economic activity, and obviously lifestyle for residents. Dundalk is a great example, as you already heard from the sponsor, where there's tremendous truck activity because of the Port of Baltimore and Trade Point Atlantic. And there are no buffers in those areas between residential and industrial neighborhoods. And so, there is this alternative option that we have had for a number of years, which is you can come out of the Port of Baltimore and essentially turn right on Broning Highway and you go down to 695, but you do pass through the toll plaza or the toll gantry now as part of that to go eastbound, even though you are not ever going over what was formerly the Key Bridge. Historically, we have worked with the agency on a number of efforts to try and address this. Most currently, since the bridge collapse, they have suspended toll collection for that movement, and we know that that is being heavily utilized by truck traffic right now, temporarily, until the new bridge is redesigned. And so, this bill really would try to make a permanent solution of that by relocating that gantry so that you only cross through it if you are actually going to proceed over the bridge. And so we appreciate your consideration and ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some questions. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug Grammer, an interesting bill. I can honestly say I've only driven around the Key Bridge twice in my life, and that's been here 40 years. So I'm really not familiar with the area. But I can't quite understand why the Highway Department is so resistant to this if we're going to build a brand new bridge. And it should take into consideration all areas and images to say it's going to cost me $700,000 to do a traffic study of something that I would think should be maybe included in a new bridge design.
That's a great question, a great point. I will say the builder has been named. The builder is aware of the problem, but they really don't determine the design or the ultimate solution. So they're kind of taking direction from either the governor's office or the legislature. So it's really up to us to say what we can or have to do at this point. This fix has been discussed many times. Previously from this committee, it's been determined that they couldn't change the structure of the roads because of agreements they had, bonding requirements, and that's why the situation we're in now is really so unique, because we're doing this from scratch. So if it's of the will of the committee, I can dig back and find previous physical notes of similar bills where they articulated options for this specific fix to this problem. There are examples of the fix, like I said previously, in consolidated transportation programs that were just contingent on funding. But I don't really understand why department continues to just not want to help us with this problem.
Well, is it the bridge being paid for with federal dollars?
Yeah, I think ultimately the bridge will be paid for, it'll be fully federally funded.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Delegate Grammer, it's the same kind of question, but maybe you know where the bidding is in process. Where are we in line? Because it's my understanding that this is a design build kind of thing, and you can't really be making changes once it's accepted. So, I mean, what is the time frame that we're working with here?
I think there's a lot of time. We're trying to get a meeting with the builder, Kiewit, and they've said they know of the problem. He said I've heard through, the advocates that represent Kiewit that they could deal with this issue. But it's been, advised to me they don't make the call about the rebuild. They really have to, for a specific request like this, it has to come from the state.
And so is there a request for proposal out there, or is it already decided who's going to do it? And that's what I'm trying to find out. Where are we in the process?
It's my understanding that Kiewit's been named as the builder.
Okay.
And I don't think the ultimate final plan where they lay out, the exact plan on paper and this is how it's going to be done. I have not seen that. I have requested that from the agency. They said they will give it to me when they have it. That was, I believe, of last week. So while we have this nice picture of the two big towers with the suspended bridge, I have not yet received, despite my request, a finalized plan.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, good to see you. Obviously, I'm very familiar with this area as our districts border one another, and I literally drove over the Key Bridge every day. But I do have some questions, so just kind of help me understand the communities particularly that this impacts. So I want to wrap my brain around that.
So these are, Turner Station, Logan Village, highly dense residential areas, Old Dundalk, the ABC streets. This is, if there's one area in my district in Dundalk that's mostly rental properties, it's this area. Dundalk in general is an old industrial area, so there are a lot of places where we abut industrial spaces, and it's also surrounded by state roads. So you have one of these legacy areas that's heavily residentially dense, also has a ton of industrial traffic because they're quite literally between the Port of Baltimore and Trade Point Atlantic, and the traffic in the morning and the evening is just horrendous.
Okay, and then I guess going off of some of our other colleagues' questions, the design itself, it sounds like the builder is aware, but are these designs feasible, some of the stuff that we're talking about here?
Yeah, and they've said they're aware of the problem. They've talked to, they didn't name any, when the information came back to me, they didn't say who they had spoken with, but they said they were aware of the problem. And what I'll do is, when I get the maps to the committee, I'll also dig through, get the old physical notes, and I'll find it in the old consolidated transportation programs. But the fix for this specific problem has been talked about for quite a few years.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate.
Okay. So, Delegate, just looking at the testimony from the Department of Transportation, which is unfavorable but only written, I have two questions. One is, I think their concern is because this is going to be federally funded. That was put in law last year. The National Environmental Policy Act exception that they're using to avoid having to go through a lengthy environmental review requires basically the same structure to be built. Obviously, we know the height difference, but other than that, so do you have any response to that about how they can avoid that problem while still complying with your bill?
From the initial plans that I've seen, the same structure will not be rebuilt, just based on their need to kind of change the dimensions of the bridge. So while I think generally they're probably following federal law, I don't think the next bridge will look like the old one as far as width or length or space on the two abutting peninsulas. I don't think it's going to be the same.
So you think they could still make this change but comply
Absolutely,
with
yeah.
And the second thing, and this come up, you and I have actually worked on this at various times over the years. One of the things that's come up is the roadway. It's not just the bridge that's part of the toll facility, it's also the roadway. So under your bill, would State Highway or Baltimore County or somebody else take over maintenance of that stretch of roadway, since we're not going to collect a toll on it?
You know, Mr. Chair, I think there's a solution here whether if we're willing to find it. And it's been discussed that Baltimore County has been willing to purchase some of this road. Just to elaborate what the chair is talking about here, this is, the bridge is under the authority of the Maryland Transportation Authority. And while the commuters we're speaking of don't traverse the bridge, they do traverse a little teeny bit of road under the authority of the Maryland Transportation Authority. Whether we want to have the county buy that portion and fix it that way, I'm fine. But of course, we have a transition in the Baltimore County Executive, which, you know, it's very complicated. So I think those options are feasible, and if it's of the will of the committee that we take that path to help us deal with the problem, I'm fine with that. I just need all this traffic out of my poor communities.
Okay, any further questions for the sponsors panel? Okay, thank you, Delegate Grammer.
Thank you so much.
Concludes the bill here on 679. We'll turn to House Bill 440, Prince George's County Delegation, SHA Memorials, Maryland Route 210, and Prince George's County, PG 307-25.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Boyce, and esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Sorry, I know, not a great start. I apologize. With that said, for the record, I'm sorry, that's so funny. I can't stop it. Chris Valderrama, here to present House Bill 440. In all seriousness, for those of you who are members of Prince George's delegation, you know we moved this bill out unanimously. Simply put, I'll try to be brief. This bill is simply asking that State Highway Administration place a sign of memorialism on Route 210. I don't have to tell this committee how many deaths have occurred there. I've been before you numerous times regarding the speeding and the speed camera issue. With that said, we are asking for a sign to memorialize those victims that have died on 210, and we're asking for a particular location, if you're familiar with 210, near Kirby Road, which is unfortunately a common site for the tragedies that have transpired there. And to be exact, it is where a young woman was struck crossing the road. She wasn't even in a car, so it's not a pedestrian-friendly route there, and she was on her way to a job interview. And it's also where 3 young children in their car seats with their parents died, but the parents survived. Unfortunately, they wish they had died with their children. And also where, anyway, too many tragedies on that road. With that said, I know you're looking before you, and there's a fiscal note that accompanies this legislation about, and I believe it's at $10,000. I will say that there have been numerous discussions and still ongoing with our office, the delegation, and with State Highway Administration, trying to come to an agreement on this issue. I'm surprised that it is taking this long, given I don't think it's much of an ask to place this memorial on Route 210. With that said, it's looking positive. There is a cross file on the Senate side regarding this legislation, and it is our hope that we can come to an agreement shortly. And if that is the case, then, you know, both the Senate file and my bill here, the delegation bill here, we would consider withdrawing the legislation if we were to come to an agreement. But with that said, I'm not holding my breath, and I just want to push forward with this legislation. And with that, I would respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 440.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, thank you. We do have a virtual witness, Ron Weiss with Maryland 210 Traffic Safety Committee. Please go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Chair Corman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, I'm Ron Weiss. I live near 210, and it's my main street. Every day I share the highway with 80,000 vehicles, including many reckless drivers. My goal, like all of us, is to get home safely. 210 is one of Maryland's deadliest highways, with 95 recorded fatalities in the recent years. It's deadly by design. It was made to go fast and straight from the district to Indian Head. Speeding and reckless driving continue to make this road dangerous for everyone. The sign is not just a tribute, it's a safety measure. Visible reminders change driver behavior. State Highway does this all the time with their signs. It reinforces the fact that reckless driving has consequences and encourages responsible driving. The Traffic Safety Committee has worked since 2017 to work on solutions, including speed enforcement, public education, and legislative action. Thanks to Delegate Valderrama. While progress has been made, we continue pushing for safety improvements. Improving HB 440 shows that Maryland is committed to honoring lives lost and preventing future tragedies. I urge you to support HB 440 to help make 210 a safer road for all of us. Let's ensure that victims are never forgotten and that their memories drive real change. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 440. We'll turn to House Bill 528. Delegate Stein, Baltimore County Vehicle Laws, Private Roadways in Residential Subdivisions and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. As we all know, and we've certainly heard a lot of poignant testimony today, many communities are concerned about speeding. And when community reps meet with our local police precincts or departments, community members will often ask police officers for traffic enforcement on a particular street in their community. The officers will then take down the street name and put it on their list for enforcement. However, in HOAs and condo associations, the police are not allowed to do any motor vehicle enforcement under state law. This was a surprise to me, but state law says that drivers are only subject to the rules of the road on roads that are used by the public in general. Drivers on private roads located within a private residential subdivision or community are not required to obey rules of the road. Now, there's one county where this is an exception, and that's Calvert County. And I've talked to Delegate Morgan, and the ability for police to enforce the rules of the road in HOAs and condo associations has apparently worked well there. So this lack of ability to enforce has been a particular problem in one HOA in my district, the Queen Anne Village community. And as you'll hear shortly from the HOA president, Max Wolfthal, speeding has been a big challenge. Now, as originally drafted, this bill would add Baltimore County to Calvert County in allowing police to enforce traffic laws in HOAs and condo associations. Baltimore County is proposing a pilot program for the community at issue, which we are fine with. The bill is on the delegation voting list for tomorrow, so hopefully the committee will get a letter very shortly. So with that, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the bill sponsor? Delegate Terrassa.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe I can talk to you offline about this, but I thought that HOAs could give permission to the police to be on those roads. Is that and that's not?
Not under the reading of the state law that I've got. And
well, either way, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea, just to be clear. But I'll talk to you offline because I thought Columbia Association had some kind of. It might be in statute or something, but we can talk offline. Thank you for the bill.
Sure. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the sponsor? Okay, we do have a virtual witness, Max, the aforementioned Max Wolfthal. Can you unmute, sir? You're on mute. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Hi. My name is Max Wolfthal. I am the HOA president of Queen Anne Village in Owings Mills. We are a community of 405 townhouses. I've been on the board here for over 20 years. I've served as the president for the past 16. In the time I've done this, I've had an awful lot of complaints from residents about cars speeding and mostly just totally disobeying stop signs and other traffic control devices. After we asked our county police to attempt some enforcement, and they made me aware a long time ago that they have little to no authority to do anything in the community because it's private property, including our roadways. Several officers I've spoken to seem to have different opinions or they're not real clear on this law, but because of that, none of them will attempt to enforce it. Some of them even told me when they're standing there talking to me on the side of the road, they just tell me how badly the people drive in here, but they said their hands are tied. I did some research and I did find that Calvert County does have an exception to this rule in Maryland that does allow police officers to enforce the provisions of the Maryland vehicle law on a private roadway located within a residential subdivision. I appreciate that Baltimore County is willing to make my community a pilot case. I certainly hope you'll support House Bill 528 as amended to help create a safer environment and driving experience in communities like this in Baltimore County. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any questions. So that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 528 and all the bill hearings for this afternoon. We have 2 subcommittees meeting this afternoon. Chair Healy?
Yes, the local government subcommittee will meet at 3:15 on Zoom.
Great. And Chair Stewart is not here. He's still in a bill hearing. So I would recommend if you're on transportation to keep an eye on your email because he will circulate a time after local government after he's done with his bill hearing. Just a reminder about tomorrow after floor, we have a voting session. We have a briefing on fisheries with the Department of Natural Resources, and then we have bill hearings. So we have a full Valentine's Day afternoon together tomorrow that I'm very much looking forward to, as I can see all of you are as well. And I forgot a very important announcement yesterday, which is that pitchers and catchers have reported to Sarasota for the Orioles. So nature is healing and spring training is beginning. And I will see you all later today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.